At 10:53 a.m. on January 30th, 2007, a propane gas explosion destroyed the Little General convenience store in rural Ghent, West Virginia, near the city of Beckley. The blast killed 2 propane service technicians and 2 emergency responders from the Ghent Fire Department. A volunteer firefighter was seriously injured, as were 4 store employees who were inside the store when the gas ignited. West Virginia State Fire Marshal Sterling Lewis recalls the day of the accident.
It was a scene that was horrific to me because of the familiarity that I had with the area growing up there for 52 years. There was a tremendous amount of carnage. We had firefighters down. We had civilians that were down.
I believe the main reason that we investigated this accident was that there was a tragic, unnecessary loss of life.
In this case, we had 2 emergency responders that were killed and 2 propane technicians in a seemingly routine operation. And from that standpoint, the CSB thought it was important to uncover the root causes and find out why these people died.
Nearly 30 minutes elapsed between the release and the explosion. If there'd been an evacuation during those 30 minutes, all of the lives would have been saved.
The Little General gas station and convenience store was located on Flat Top Road in Ghent. Inside the wood-framed building, the store sold soft drinks, magazines, and snacks, as well as pizza, which was cooked in 2 propane-fired ovens. In 1994, the Southern Sun Company installed a 500-gallon propane tank against the back wall of the store. Southern Sun sold its propane business to Ferrell Gas in 1996. The logo on the tank was changed, but the tank itself was left in place. Years later, in January 2007, the Little General Company changed propane providers from Ferrell Gas to Thompson Gas. Appalachian Heating, a local firm selling propane for Thompson Gas, installed a new tank 10 feet from the building. There were still about 350 gallons of propane in the old tank, which Appalachian Heating intended to transfer through a special valve, hose, and pump to the newly installed Thompson gas tank. To make such a transfer, a technician must first unscrew a safety plug from the top of the liquid withdrawal valve on the tank to be emptied. The safety plug has a small hole in its side called a telltale. If propane is released through the hole, it is a warning that a dangerous release is likely if the plug is completely removed. So if propane is seen, the plug should be retightened. If no propane is observed escaping, the plug may be removed, and a valve with a special fitting is then threaded into the liquid withdrawal valve. This special fitting depresses a spring-loaded mechanism, allowing propane to flow through the valve and into the hose to transfer the propane. The CSB determined that on the day of the accident, several factors combined to turn what should have been a routine tank exchange into a tragedy. On the morning of January 30th, 2007, 2 technicians from Appalachian Heating arrived to put the new tank into service. The lead technician then departed for another job site, leaving an inexperienced junior technician to prepare for the transfer of propane unsupervised. At about 10:25 a.m., the junior technician began to unscrew the safety plug from the liquid withdrawal valve, a valve the CSB would later determine was permanently stuck in the open position. Propane likely flowed out of the hole in the plug, but the technician had not been trained on the importance of checking for the escaping gas. Immediately, as the technician removed the plug, a jet of propane sprayed upward through the valve. A billowing white cloud of flammable propane vapor formed behind the store. The propane struck the eaves of the building and flowed into the store through vents in the roof overhang and directly into the restrooms through 2 vent pipes. The flammable gas also diffused down through the ceiling. The gas, colored gray here for illustration, was invisible to the employees inside, but they noted the spreading odor associated with propane. The dense vapor also accumulated at ground level around the tank and the foundation of the building. The technician, standing in the midst of the propane cloud, was unable to stop the release due to the force of the jet. Over the next almost half hour, all 4 store employees remained inside, and the technicians stayed by the tank as others responding to the propane release arrived. There was no evacuation as propane continued to escape from the tank. At 10:28 a.m., shortly after the leak began, the junior technician called the lead technician, informing him of the situation. At 10:31, the lead technician called Thompson Gas Technical Support for guidance. The lead technician then called the junior technician back and likely told him to call 911. At 10:40 a.m., the junior technician made a 911 emergency call.
911, where's your emergency?
He told the operator, "I need the fire department down at the Little General store in Gent. I've got a propane leak. I need their help to secure the area." He went on to say, "I work for Appalachian Heating. We've had a dysfunction in the tanks and I have a leaky tank." At 10:43 a.m., the county 911 operator broadcast the report of a propane leak.
Raleigh Control, Station 110, Station 110, injuries on Flat Top Road in Gent, the Little General, across from Flat Top Lake. Report of a propane leak.
4 minutes later, at about 10:47 a.m., a Gent Volunteer Fire Department captain arrived. He ordered the store to close. The employees turned off the gasoline pumps, locked the door, and remained inside. They posted a sign on the door reading, "Store closed due to gas leak." Despite the imminent danger, no one inside or outside the building evacuated. Next, 2 emergency medical technicians arrived in an ambulance. They went to the tank to examine the technician for a frostbite injury, likely caused by contact with the liquid propane. Just after 10:50 a.m., the lead technician returned to the scene and joined the junior technician at the leaking tank. A short time later, another volunteer firefighter arrived in his personal vehicle and met the others at the tank. It was now approaching 10:53 a.m. The 2 propane technicians remained near the leaking tank. The fire captain, the firefighter, and an emergency medical technician stood nearby. The other EMT directed traffic away from the store. The 4 employees waited inside. The captain told the firefighter, "Make sure everybody's out, okay?" But 30 seconds later, as the firefighter walked toward the store, the propane found an undetermined ignition source and exploded.
911, where's your emergency? The propane tank blew up. The building is gone. It's gone, lady.
The explosion leveled the Little General store, propelling building fragments in all directions. The propane tanks landed more than 50 feet away.
I remember the store sitting there, and when I arrived, there was nothing sitting there. And that's about the best way to describe it that I know of.
The 2 technicians, the fire captain, and the EMT standing near the leaking tank were struck by flying debris and killed. The 4 store employees and the other firefighters survived, but they sustained serious burns and other injuries. The EMT who had been directing traffic survived with an arm injury.
The liquid withdrawal valve on a propane tank is very rarely used. It is designed to enable propane companies to actually empty the tank of its contents.
The CSB performed extensive testing and examination of the liquid withdrawal valve from the tank in Gent. CSB investigators concluded that a manufacturing defect 2 decades earlier likely caused the valve to jam permanently in the open position. Only the safety plug had been preventing liquid propane from escaping. Jeff Wanko led the CSB investigation.
This is the actual valve from the incident at Gent. The CSB was able to section the valve so we can take a look at the interior mechanism and workings of this valve. We found that the hole drilled through this lower guide was too small for the stem to move freely.
With the valve stuck in the open position, propane was likely released through the telltale hole when the unsupervised junior technician, who had received no formal training, began removing the safety plug.
We found that the propane technician working on the tank was not trained in the standard procedures for the job tasks that he was doing, and that he likely removed the plug without checking the hole for a propane leak.
The junior technician who was servicing the tank that morning had no training. He had only been on the job for a month and a half.
The propane industry's primary training tool is the Certified Employee Training Program, or CETP. It was developed by the Propane Education and Research Council, which was established by Congress in 1996. The training cautions technicians to unscrew the safety plug part way and then check the telltale hole for escaping propane for at least 30 seconds. The training emphasizes, if in doubt, do not remove the closing cap. But the junior technician had never received any formal industry training. In fact, only 14 states in the country have any training or testing requirements for propane technicians. 36 states do not have any requirements.
The state of West Virginia currently does not require that propane technicians be trained in how to perform their tasks or how to perform their tasks safely.
The CSB recommended that the governor and legislature of West Virginia require training and qualification for all propane technicians. And the CSB recommended that the National Fire Protection Association amend the National Fire Codes to require specific training and testing for all personnel who handle propane. Federal OSHA regulations require that propane technicians who perform installation, removal, operation, and maintenance work shall be properly trained in such function. However, the rules do not define what constitutes proper training. The CSB called upon the National Propane Gas Association to request that OSHA determine whether the industry's Certified Employee Training Program meets OSHA requirements.
We found that the propane industry standard training program covers all of the routine tasks that you would expect a propane technician to perform. However, this training did not cover any emergency tasks and did not cover what a propane technician should do in the case of an emergency.
On the day of the accident, neither of the propane technicians evacuated the area of the cloud, nor did they instruct others to do so.
The first priority in responding to a propane emergency is to get people out of harm's way, to evacuate the area and make sure people are safe and not in an area where they could be injured by a fire or explosion.
The CSB noted that propane technicians are frequently called upon to assist firefighters in responding to propane emergencies.
The propane technicians are a very valuable part, a very big asset to us in this situation. We would like to know through the fire service that these technicians are trained to the level that they can tell us point blank, it can't be fixed, we have to get away.
The CSB recommended that the Propane Education and Research Council revise the industry training program to include emergency response guidance for propane technicians. The training should emphasize the need to evacuate the scene of a release until the hazards are fully understood. And the council should develop safe procedures for transferring propane between tanks or prohibit such transfers.
I would like to know that the technicians, when they're responding with my firefighters out there, that they're educated to the highest level they can be.
Had the tank been installed the required 10 feet away from the building, there still may have been a large fire from this incident. However, it's unlikely that the propane would have accumulated inside the building to an explosive level.
The tank was located directly under the roof vents, providing a direct path for the propane gas to enter the building. OSHA regulations and the West Virginia State Fire Code both require that 500-gallon propane tanks be located at least 10 feet away from buildings. But for more than a decade, Ferrellgas personnel had allowed the propane tank to remain directly against the back wall of the Little General store, even as they refilled the tank more than 100 times since it was initially installed.
The investigation team interviewed many delivery and service personnel who worked on this tank. All of them were well aware of the 10-foot separation requirement, and all of them were aware that this tank was in violation of that separation requirement. But none of them had reported the unsafe placement of this tank to their managers.
Drivers told CSB investigators they believed the tank location had been approved, possibly under a variance from current rules. But there was no variance. Although Ferrellgas had twice inspected the propane system at the Little General Store in 2000, the tank was never relocated. The CSB recommended that Ferrellgas establish an improved auditing system and an inspection program for propane systems based on the requirements of the National Fire Code for propane.
The lesson on this is that fire departments, big and small, need to train on a regular basis on dealing with the hazards of a propane release and realize that the potential for an explosion here is very significant. And when an explosion occurs, it can have catastrophic consequences.
Guidance for emergency responders recommends evacuation as the first task in a hazardous materials emergency. However, the fire captain's final direction, make sure everybody is out, came too late. Moments later, the store exploded. The CSB investigation found that firefighters in West Virginia are only required to receive 4 hours of hazardous materials training when they begin their careers as emergency responders. That training directs firefighters to take only defensive actions when responding to a hazardous materials incident, and to follow the instructions found in the Department of Transportation's Emergency Response Guidebook. The guidebook directs responders to evacuate the area around all propane releases to a radius of 330 feet. For major propane leaks, evacuations should be extended to about a half-mile downwind from the incident site. The CSB determined that the fire captain had last attended West Virginia's Hazardous Materials Response Course in 1998, 9 years prior to the accident. No refresher training was required.
When people are trained to perform a task and they don't perform that task, their knowledge deteriorates over time. And so refresher training is very important to keep that knowledge current so that they understand the appropriate actions to take in an emergency.
If you see that vapor cloud and you hear it and you smell it, you need to be leaving it alone. And you need to evacuate the area. We take the vow to protect life and property. Life comes first. Let the property go to save those lives.
The CSB recommended that West Virginia require annual hazardous materials training for all firefighters and EMTs in the state. The board also called on the State Fire Commission to require that all West Virginia fire departments perform at least one hazardous materials response drill each year.
It's very important that the state of West Virginia grab this bull by the horns, as you might say, and push this training out to their firefighters. We need to do that.
The CSB determined that the junior propane technician had called 911 from the Little General Store at 10:40 a.m., 13 minutes prior to the explosion. But he and the 911 operator did not exchange important information about the magnitude of the release or the potential danger to any people in the area. The only information the 911 operator relayed to the fire department was the address and the report of a propane leak.
Well, 911 operators in the United States use sets of guide cards, sort of a question and answer, some pre-arrival instructions to the caller. The investigation team found that there is no guide card specific to propane. If a propane card existed, 911 operators certainly could have asked some critical questions about the nature of the release, where the release was occurring, if propane was getting into a building, and if people were being exposed.
Answers to those questions might have led to different emergency response actions at the Little General Store. Instead, responders drove directly into the area, and the store employees and propane technicians remained in the danger zone.
The lessons to be learned, I think, from this incident is anytime that a call goes into a 911 center, for them to relay the questions to the person calling in, to get that information, to discern what exactly is the situation. You know, do I have a small propane leak coming from my grill, or do I have a 500-pounder that's blowing and you know, completely out of control?
The CSB recommended that the Association of Public Safety Communications officials develop a new emergency guide card for propane to assist 911 operators. And the board urged the West Virginia E911 Council to distribute guidance about propane emergencies to all 911 call centers in the state.
The three causes of this accident were: 1, Ferrell Gas did not identify the hazard of the tank location or correct it. 2, Appalachian Heating did not train the propane technician and allowed him to work alone on the day of the incident. And 3, the propane technicians and emergency responders were not trained to evacuate the area immediately upon a propane release.
There are about 17.5 million propane installations in the United States. Releases are occurring every day. Therefore, propane technicians, emergency responders, 911 operators have to be prepared for these emergencies.
I think one of the key messages that I would like to pass along to the fire service is every incident you go on, whether it be a propane leak, a cat in a tree, it doesn't matter what we're going on. You have to take the same precaution on every one, because the bottom line for everything we do in the fire service is everyone comes home.
Following the explosion, the Little General store was not rebuilt. Today, the site remains a memorial to the victims.
We want to make sure that fire department personnel, emergency response personnel, propane technicians are not killed or injured in an incident like this. Propane is a widely used fuel, but deaths from propane explosions can be prevented. Thank you for watching this CSB safety video.
For more information on the CSB investigation of the Gent propane explosion, please visit csb.gov.